Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started here in 60 seconds. We just want to allow for all registrants to get connected to Zoom and get settled in. You will be able to see our screen and there will be a bit of silence, but do not worry, you're in the right place. We'll get started shortly. Welcome to the Gaining a Better Understanding of Self-Funding webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. As you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A function on the Zoom menu bar located at the bottom of your screen. We will compile questions there and then answer as many as possible. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Joining us today is Bill Mattecheck. He has been managing self-funded medical plans since the mid-80s. He is vice president for NFP, which is one of the top 10 insurance firms in the US. Bill has responsibility for the Pacific Northwest. We are very excited to have him speaking with us today. It is my great pleasure to hand the call over to our speaker. Bill, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Amber. Good morning. I'd like to thank everyone for taking time today to take part in this discussion. We're scheduled for about an hour, should be 50 minutes or so, and a little bit of time for questions if we have any. So let's get started. So our thoughts today are key features of self-funding, the overall thought process and how we get to effectively manage claims and keep our plan cost as low as possible is the overriding objective. First, we want to choose an appropriate TPA. We need to evaluate stop loss coverage, and then we need to effectively manage all claims. So the TPA evaluation, the TPA becomes they become the direct contact for the majority of your employee needs. And the ability of the TPA to be responsive for your participants is the first step towards having a successful plan. You know, employees really appreciate having good service and will recognize that you've set up the plan to take care of them. Accuracy is so important in the TPA choice. The TPA coordinates all aspects of your self-funded plan, and they must show a high level of accuracy at all times in its financial reporting. The financial reporting in this type of circumstance is all vendors that provide services to be managed under the TPA, and it really is a reflection of your fixed costs on a go-forward basis. Reporting capabilities, little play on words here, but what happens is we're now going to add in some of the claim detail. So whereas financial transactions are your fixed cost, reporting capabilities now will include your claim detail and will fluctuate based on actual claims that are being paid through the plan. And the reports will include fixed cost and claim cost. The other thing about a TPA that you have to really be careful of and make sure that we have the right tools in place for managing claims. So claim management tools, they provide specific details on all types of claims and can easily help to determine where additional support or design changes are needed to meet your needs. You know, these tools can include predictive modeling, which will help to slow down increases in certain categories, you know, such as cardiovascular or high blood pressure, so forth, because you can put programs in play to help mitigate that as it increases through your plan. So you can be much more effective in your management of your claims overall. And then claim edit tools, something we don't really, you know, see much discussion about. But a claim edit tool is an internal process that a TPA uses to go through to what we call scrub claims. And these tools watch for duplicate billing, dishonest billing practices, upcharging, or unbundling, which unfortunately is a common practice. And so we want to really make sure the TPA is taking care of that on your behalf. The second piece is on the stop loss insurance. What is it, when, how much? So stop loss insurance is really designed to protect the employer from financial loss or severe fluctuations in cash flow. So specific coverage is a policy that you buy that says you will only pay so much money for any one employee on a particular claim. And that caps your loss or your risk at that number. You might buy a specific of 25,000, 50,000, or 100,000. And it really depends on the size of your organization and your affinity for risk as to how high that might be. The aggregating specific is really a management tool that says, well, you know, my premium for my specific is X. I really don't want to pay that much. What if I take on a little bit more risk as the employer? Will you reduce my premium? And most carriers will do what's called the aggregating specific and let you take on an additional 50,000 or an additional 100,000 of the first claim, and therefore reduce your premium by a dollar for dollar amount. And then it's just a little bit of rolling the dice as to whether or not those claims occur during the next 12 months. Aggregate coverage is the entire plan. So if we're starting a plan or running a plan on an annual basis, you like to know what your annual liability is and where it will be. You can buy aggregate protection, and it protects you from a large number of claims that are all accumulated together and don't. So if they start to go over a certain amount, the insurance company will step in and will take care of that balance from there on up. This coverage is usually in play to protect the total plan cost. Now you can also, if it's a first year plan, if you're first year starting with self-funded, you may want to add for a year or two aggregate accommodation, which says, if, for example, we have triplets premature in the first month, we don't want to have to pay all that cost in the first month, even though we know we're capped for the year, because we want to level our cash flow. Then you can do an accommodation which will allow you to get covered, and the insurance company in effect advances the money to you and then spreads it out over the rest of the year. Those are ways we can look at stop loss. One other item in stop loss that we're seeing more and more these days, and we really feel is important to analyze whether or not it makes sense, is a captive. And there are captive programs that fit some situations, but the exercise itself on to determine whether or not it makes sense for your company should be done every time. We're seeing more of group captives where we can take employers like-minded into a larger pool and allow for efficiencies in pricing of stop loss coverage and allow for entry into that space at a much lower cost to the employer. That's also part of this process. Let's take a quick look at a case study. And in this particular situation, we have an employer located in 4 states doing manufacturing. They have 550 employees total. What I'm trying to illustrate here and trying to show you is that if the TPA cost is $200,000 annually, represents 5.7% of the total, and you get a 25% rate increase, which seems like a very large increase, the overall impact on your total plan cost is only 1.4%. So if the TPA is providing really good service, your employees are happy, they're doing their claim edits, they're managing the claims effectively internally, then the additional 1.4% may be worth it. And same with stop loss. 525,000 in premiums, 15% of your total cost. A 12.5% increase there is only 1.86% in impact in your total spend on an annual basis. So these are things that we want to watch really carefully, in that we really need the quality of the service and the quality of the contract on the stop loss to override the pricing, because of the impact of the overall plan cost is minimal. But the claims, that's different. 2.8 million in claims, 80% of your total spend. An increase there would represent a 10% increase, could be almost 8% in your total. That's the number that we want to focus on in our discussions today. Out of that 2.8 million, pharmacy claims run in this plan about $507,000. So claim management, which is extremely important to this. We're going to bring the TPA back in for just a minute. The TPA's role is to triage all claims that come into your firm, no matter where they come from, and they'll direct them either to pre-authorization or case management team. And that pre-authorization case management group can be tightened up or loosened up by the employer under a self-funded environment, depending on what items you may or may not want to have paid for your group, depending on unique situations and so forth. TPA can also set up and direct certain claims to contracted facilities. Perhaps we have an orthopedic surgeon firm, and we can go direct to them, and we know we'll have a flat cost at a certain amount for knees or shoulders and so forth. And so we direct our employees there because we know our overall plan costs will be reduced. And the TPA can help direct us that way. Pharmacy controls need to be in place on an ongoing basis. And then line by line bill review is critical for large claim management. And those last two items, or we get into the next segment of today's discussion. So first, we're going to take a look on the claim management side. We're going to take a look at pharmacy. I'm going to introduce Charlie Hartung. He's the Executive Vice President for NFP Rx Solutions, along with Austin Stolzer, his Senior Healthcare Coordinator, and they'll take you through how to mitigate pharmacy costs. Charlie, it's all you.
Thanks, Bill. If you can go, I think, 2 more slides forward. Austin and I, as Bill alluded to, are going to tag team this. What we would like to do is go over who we are just real quick so you know who you're kind of talking to, how we work with you. And then lastly, we'll go over some actual programs to consider to help mitigate your overall pharmacy cost. So in a nutshell, NFP Rx Solutions is a tool within the toolbox of the NFP company. And what we are is a PBM consulting firm. We're not a PBM. As a matter of fact, we're actually PBM agnostic. As you can see in the bottom of the screen, we work with the 3 major PBMs across the country, CVS, Express Scripts, and Optum. We can work with other PBMs. The challenge is they traditionally can't meet the rebate rates that we demand in our contracting, and they can't meet our contracted rates, the actual AWP that you pay for the drug. So we'll work with any PBM that any of you want to bring to us, but we're going to hold them to very high standards and pass those savings along to you. As you can see, we were founded in 2007. We've got 8 clinical pharmacists on staff, a number of account executives, and 9 pharmacy analysts. And why that's important is if you look, for example, at the bottom right-hand corner, it says over 2,500 clinical interventions. Our pharmacists, if you were to tap into our services and use our coalition to manage your pharmacy cost, our pharmacists actually reach out on a daily basis to your employees, your members, and make sure and triage the claims, making sure that they're being prescribed correctly. We identify any high specialty cost claims and triage that and see if there's opportunities to lower those costs. So the way we built our company is the PBMs are really good at hiding money. They just are not user-friendly, and they're very difficult to work with unless you know how to navigate through their systems. So over the last 13, 14 years, what we've done is we've aggregated or added every time a new client hires us, we put them into our coalition, and we use our entire coalition that's just over 1.5 million members now to negotiate our contract pricings on behalf of our clients. So what that means to you in layman's terms, if you will, is if you were a 1,000-life group and you went to underwriting or direct to the PBMs, the underwriter is going to say, oh, a 1,000-life group, you get 1,000-life pricing. That makes sense. That is what the underwriter's job is. What we've done is we've created a coalition with 1.5 million, as I already mentioned, and we use that pricing with the PBMs. And we use that power to get our contracts at the level we want. So the PBMs never know that we're talking to a 500-life group or a 5,000-life group. We've taken our pricing and we pass those savings along to you. And there's no bias, if you will. Also part of our coalition is every single one of our groups will be assigned an implementation manager, a clinical pharmacist, as I had mentioned before, as well as an analytics person. Data's power in pharmacy. It's a huge portion of your spend, and it's low-hanging fruit to be able to mitigate those costs. So again, we manage your contracts for you. You have complete control over what your plan design looks like. It's ultimately your plan design. Our job is to help mitigate costs, get lower costs for your drugs, as well as get you better rebates. If you can go to the next slide, we'll talk about how we work with you and how we get to savings numbers. As you can see there, we're averaging about 27%. So literally, if you just took what you're spending in pharmacy, we probably reprice about 100 groups a year, all about 250 employees or greater, and we're averaging 27% savings. And the way we do that is a number of the different strategies you see there bullet pointed. Initially, what we're going to do is ask you for a claims file, and we're going to take what you spent over a 12-month period and lay it over our contract, saying, had you been under our contract, here's what you would have spent in that same contract year. We also are going to look at your clinical, your high cost claims and make recommendations. And that's what Austin's going to go over, some actual actionable programs that we have that you can put into place, so that you should be considering as you're looking at your plan design. How do we put these clinical programs in place to capture high cost claims and mitigate those costs? Simple things like maybe it's site of care. Maybe there's a specialty drug that's that's been prescribed, but there's a generic or a brand alternative. There's so many new drugs in the pipeline. It's really, really difficult to keep up with that. That's what we do for you at no cost. So we'll do a financial analysis and a clinical analysis for you. We'll have management in place, account managers, implementation managers, as I mentioned. And then we also have a data analytics team. And that's important because, you know, if you're not flexible enough in the plan year, you can get really surprised by a couple high cost claimants, and it'll take you off a budget. So we've got data analysts and account managers that are looking at your activity on a daily basis so that there's no surprises. We don't want you 3 quarters into the year, or maybe at the end of the year when you get your annual reports, seeing a huge spike in your spend that could have been managed or mitigated, if you will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch seats with Austin, and he's going to
Charlie.
Yes, sir.
Real quick before you do that, we have a question that Monica asked about 340B and if you work with 340B organizations.
We do work with 340B organizations. Great
Okay.
question. Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Yep. We worked obviously in an unbundled, carved out scenario, self-funded, but yes, we can work with 340B as well as any union groups, those type of things.
Great. Thank you.
So what Austin's going to do is he's going to walk you through some actual programs that we have that you should be considering as you're talking to your broker about, and making sure that you're aware that these things are plugs that you can plug in and you have control over and can control your cost. They can be very confusing programs, but we take that away. We take that heavy lift away and we manage the entire process. So I'll let Austin walk through that. And then again, please stop us. I don't see the questions popping up, Bill. So obviously, as you did, stop us anywhere that you need to. So with that, here's Austin.
Yep. Thank you, Charlie. So essentially what we're wanting to call out with this slide is, you know, just to kind of show you how the marketplace is reacting to carving out. So I'll draw your attention to the right-hand side, those Fortune 500 companies. What we're really trying to show here, you know, we're looking at some of the most profitable publicly traded companies that are out there, and they're all identifying, you know, they have these teams of, you know, financial experts. They're identifying the benefits of carving out. We really like to call out those benefits of carving out on the side there. I know Charlie had, you know, touched on the account management side. You know, we always like to talk about, you know, the pricing, putting the pricing in front of the clients really gets us in the door, but the account management side and that ongoing touch bases with the account team, with the pharmacists, you know, with our data analytics teams, you know, really keeps clients with us and keeps them happy, keeping them knowledgeable on, you know, how their plan is performing. You know, with our specific account management teams, they're the ones who are going to be working with our team of pharmacists, bringing forward these clinical solutions. They'll be sharing these real-time reporting tools, you know, with you on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We work with a lot of different clients that have their own, timeframes on when they like to see things. Like Charlie had mentioned, data is power for us. So we don't like to hold off on bringing forward these types of clinical programs. The second we see a high cost claim come through on our daily claims files from the PBMs, we're immediately going through our list of programs, which we'll go through here in a second, to identify, which one's going to be the most successful for not only the plan to save money, but also making sure that, the members are being prescribed the proper medications. Of course, we're always worried about costs and wanting to make sure we're mitigating those costs when we can. But when it comes down to it, when we're looking at, the pharmacy and the drugs that are being dispensed, we want to make sure the members, getting the proper medications and the proper doses. We always like to say right medication, right time, right, indication, items like that. And that's really where our clinical oversight and account management oversight comes into play. So if I'm going to jump to the next slide. So we like to show this slide, just, presenting a couple of different, tools that are in the toolbox, or, levers that can be pulled in a carve out situation. Flexibility really is key when you carve out. You're kind of given that power to make those decisions on your own. The clinical improvement, like I had touched on, we want to make sure that, the members are being prescribed the proper medications. I know Bill had touched on it earlier in the presentation as well. We're oftentimes seeing, fraud situations or improper dosing, items like that. That's where our clinical team and our team of clinical pharmacists come into play and are able to monitor those and, call out those situations, work with the PBM as well as yourself on making sure that, the proper medications are being prescribed to your members. The next bullet point there. Oh, sorry, if you go back real quick.
Yep, sorry.
The next bullet point there with specialty management, I think specialty costs, over the past years has been the number one thing that's been driving plan costs. When we're looking at specialty medications, we're typically looking at about 1% to 2% of your members are driving upwards of 50 to 55% of your plan costs. So you really can see how impactful those specialty medications, when they're being added to a plan, can be. The couple of programs that will go here on the next slide will walk through how we help address those specialty costs specifically. So Bill, if you want to jump to the next one. So these clinical programs are really where we like to bring forward to the clients and show them, again, the opportunities of carving out and having that flexibility to manipulate your plan design to help both your members and the plan itself save money. So just going across the board, when we're looking at the Direct Procurement Solutions Program, or DPS, I like to look at manufacturer assistance as two different avenues. So essentially you're looking at patient assistance programs and copay card programs. Copay card programs have really been around for quite a while, and are specifically intended for commercially insured patients to essentially it's a bucket of money that the manufacturers make available to help offset members' costs. So we're essentially transferring the plan responsibility away from the actual client over to the manufacturer and making sure that we're taking advantage of any funds or any programs that are being made available by the manufacturer. Again, this is where our clinical team is speaking directly with your members, helping them know, okay, is this a medication that we're going to go through with the DPS program for patient assistance, or is this going to be a specialty copay assistance program? Our clinical team makes those outreaches directly to the members, making sure that they're comfortable with, where their medication is going to be coming from, how much is the cost going to be to them, how much are they saving, and then in the long run, we're saving the client's money as a whole. The next, individual medication management is really looking at, again, making sure the proper medications are being prescribed. Our team of pharmacists a couple of years ago identified that a lot of these medications that are being prescribed can simply be substituted for a couple dollar over-the-counter medications. We have these programs in place to be able to identify those medications when they do pop up. Our team gets notified and we're able to contact those members directly, letting them know that, they could be saving money by simply moving to this same clinical efficacy at a lower cost. All right, and then I'm going to hand the computer back over to Charlie to walk through a couple of case studies here that we have.
And Bill, do we have any questions that we've missed?
We have one question, Charlie. It says,
Okay.
do you have international sourcing solutions?
We do. We work, with CanRx and a number of different international resources. It's on a case-by-case basis, but yes, we can work with international sourcing. Great question, by the way, because it is, you see it on the news all the time, right? People are asking about that all the time. So great question. One of the things that to just add on to what Austin was sharing with you, and I know we're tight on time, so I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Just imagine, if you will, every time you watch TV, you see the drug commercials, and they're always advertising, hey, if you want $10 copay or zero cost. Every manufacturer has a program out there that has a specialty drug out there, or the ones that do have them, we've identified every single one of them. So we've already done all that road work. And so it's very difficult to navigate through the manufacturer's sites and how to go about getting those funds. That's what we do. That's one of the things we do, especially on the specialty front. So that's just an example of just to add on what Austin was alluding to. So we've got two case studies here for you. As you can see, this particular one saved, 35%. It's covered up by my camera. It was a smaller, an average size group of about 500 plus employees. They were a carved-in employer, healthcare conscious, and looking for added benefits and flexibility. So what we put together in this particular case, we implemented CVS. We'll look at all three PBMs. We just try to find the best fit for that particular client. It's not always about savings, but it's the client's decision. So we want to expose you to all three of the PBMs opportunities and savings, and let you guys make that decision, but we'll certainly guide you. For example, if you're currently with CVS, that makes that transition even easier to go into our coalition under CVS. So we will guide you on what's the best way and what PBM is best for you to utilize. And in this particular case, as you can see, our contract savings was about 25%. And they instituted two of our clinical programs that Austin went over, and that saved them over $240,000 in year one. So in this particular case, we saved them about 35%. That is typical that we see when we reprice a group. And then what you'll see once you're in contract, we traditionally see about another 5% savings. If it's in clinical programs or our IMM programs or copay assistance, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's as simple as a generic steerage program, that type of thing. And then the next case study is a little larger group because I don't know who all is in the audience, but I know we've got anywhere from 250 on up employees. So this is a little larger group, but you can see this one group, 9,800 plus employees, we still saved over 25%. And in this particular case, we evaluated the best PBM form, and we had proposed contract savings in year one of $1.69 million. And then in clinical savings, we had just over $600,000. So between the two of those, we were able to analyze what they had done, looked at it clinically and looked at their contracted rates, made some recommendations, and had about a $2.3 million delta or opportunity of savings for this particular client. They implemented our specialty copay program. And that again is what I was referencing when you go on, we'll go out and find the couponing or the copay assistance programs from the manufacturers. And that in and of itself was just about half of the savings, a little more than half of the savings. So the other thing that I'll say, these are just two case studies, and we'll pass it back to Bill unless there's other questions. All we do, our job is to expose you to opportunities. So it's always your plan, and it's your choice, the employer's choice to implement whatever programs they want to implement. Our job is just to expose you to them. So appreciate the time. If there's any questions throughout, please stop and thank you.
So Charlie, No additional questions right now. My thought is that in essence, what you're doing then is you're taking the pharmacy spend and you're reducing the baseline for these employers to the correct number. And then you're managing it on a go forward basis so as to flatten those increases in the future, right? So you're helping to affect savings immediately, but also the reduction in increases in the future is huge.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, when you carve out, it allows the employer the power of negotiation because now the PBMs want their business. When you're bundled, you know, you just get the price you get. When you carve out, you create a competitive scenario, and that's where we can get better pricing and exactly what you said. So, yep, you're right.
Okay, Charlie, one last question. If you want to answer it, it says, how do you get paid?
That's a great question. So we actually get paid by the PBM, and we get paid a consulting fee from the PBM. So so it doesn't cost the client anything. It's if you will, I'm out right now, right, presenting to whoever's on the call right now. So I'm an extension of all three of the PBMs, and I have 1.5 million people in our coalition. They want access to that coalition and NFP's clients. So we get paid by the PBM, and we're cutting into their profit. They make way too much money already. It's egregious. And so we carve into their profit center, and we get paid a consulting fee via the PBM.
Okay, thanks.
Great question.
So we're gonna go ahead and move to the next in claim management. One of the areas that's really, whoops, that just surprised me. One of the big areas in claim management is the line-by-line bill review. It becomes critical for not only managing large claim costs, but also providing detail in a way that allows us to back up any reductions. So we're now going to hear from Matthew Jacobs, the Chief Business Development Officer for WellRithms, brings 15 years of experience in healthcare strategy and product development with an emphasis in cost containment. And then also we're going to hear from Dr. Ira Weintraub, is the Chief Medical Officer for WellRithms and has practiced orthopedic surgery for the last 38 years with surgical expertise in joint replacement. So fair and transparent payment to providers along with integrity and the elimination of fraud in medical billing has been Dr. Weintraub's great attraction to WellRithms. Guys, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. All right. Well, it's great to speak with all of you today about medical bill review and the fraudulent abusive practices that we see on a daily basis. Our job is quite simple. Really, we're looking at the medical bills that you are processing as a self-funded entity and making sure that you're paying the correct rate and the correct amount and no more. So really managing your costs, and you'd be surprised at how many quote unquote errors or abuses in the billing process exist. As you can see from this slide, 90% of medical bills contain errors, and they are generally in the favor of the provider, whether they're charging duplicate charges or billing for canceled tests or procedures, unbundling of charges, and so forth. So the list goes on. Most of them are, again, quote unquote errors that the billing department is making to inflate the charges that they bill. And if you're not looking at it, these bills look accurate and they look like they should be paid, but it doesn't hurt to look at these bills because you're the one with a fiduciary responsibility to pay only the amount that you should. So we're going to go through some examples. The quick question at the bottom is, if a doctor or nurse administered a dose that was 2,350 times the prescribed dosage, what would happen to the patient? Obviously, it would be traumatic, and that's what we see every single day at WellRithms when it comes to medical billing and hyperinflated charges. So not only are there errors, are just egregious billing of what is actually, what actually took place as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weintraub, and he's going to give you some examples of what we see on a daily basis.
Thank you, Matthew. And I have actually a kind of a fun part of this talk because I get to tell some stories. And I like to tell these stories because this is your money and we are working hard, and this is all behind the scenes to find these things. Now, this is an example. You can read it. I'm not going to read it line by line, but basically a hospital and a hospital built a surgery center and then tried to charge hospital outpatient rates for the surgery center. And in fact, one of the pharmacists in that hospital turned them over to the government. I just saw one the other day where a patient had surgery and was charged for $15,000 for the surgery center, and the surgery center is just a room in the doctor's office. It is not a surgery center. And so this is where WellRithms looks at the very significant details of these billings. It is important to note that the fully insured products that most of you probably have at this point, where you think your bills are being looked at carefully, in fact, they are not. The bills are discounted by whatever percentage reduction that the insurance company gives you, but they in fact are not looking at the details. We'll go through some more. Go ahead, Bill. So this was a recent case, a Detroit physician who has been sentenced now. Basically, he's going to be going to jail for the rest of his life. And these are things that as a physician myself really are they're embarrassing as a doctor to know that other doctors do this. But this particular physician was trading opioids, writing prescriptions for opioids if the patients would allow them to use their insurance information, their Medicare numbers, whatever it was, so that he could bill them for surgeries that he A, didn't do, or B, probably weren't necessary in the first place. And then these were mostly, this is mostly back pain practice. So a lot of patients being overweight, he developed a diet plan with a pharmacist. The diet plan, every time he sold it, he kicked something back to the pharmacist, and then he paid a couple of MMA wrestlers to endorse his diet plan. But all in all, over $100 million of healthcare fraud, and this is a recent case, and he's going to jail. Upcoding is a very common thing, and I'm going to look at the example on the right. Bill mentioned right in the beginning how certain large medical bills can sink the plan. And this particular plan, one of the members had premature triplets. They were 3 months early, and they were in the hospital for about 3 months, which is very typical. And the hospital billed them $900,000 a baby. We looked at the bill because this particular plan did not have stop loss insurance. And if they had to pay this nearly $3 million bill, they were going under. So we looked at it, and the biggest thing on the bill was, first of all, the babies really weren't sick. They were just premature. They didn't need surgeries. They really needed very little. And what the hospital did was overcode their acuity. They said they were sicker than they were, and they charged more for the rooms, which they have a level 1, a level 2, a level 3 neonatal intensive care, and they were billing the highest amount possible for as long as they could. The final payment made to that hospital was just a little over $1 million, saving the employer's plan and saving them about $1.6 million. This is not something that a general insurance company does. This is probably one of my favorite cases. A man was shot in the foot, and it required him to be in the hospital for 21 days. And during that time, he had 7 trips to the operating room. Now, most people are pretty astounded that people would go to the operating room 7 times in one hospital admission, but a lot of these were just to change the bandages on his foot. So he needed a little bit of anesthetic because it was painful. And but they did do surgeries, but during the surgeries, they charged for 4-inch by 4-inch gauze pads. And these gauze pads are used commonly in surgery. And the gauze pads are used to mop up the blood, and then they throw them away. Well, these gauze pads are for a box of 10 is 70 cents. And the hospital charged for 10 boxes of 10, so $7 of charges, and they charged $21,000 for a $7 cost item. And this didn't happen once on the bill, it happened 3 times on the bill. So after my combing through this itemized charges for a couple of days, finding all these ridiculous, outrageous charges, the recommended payment that WellRithms made was about $190,000, saving the plan almost $575,000 on this bill. When they were paid, they were not unhappy with that payment. This is another common, this is an unbundling. You've heard the word before, but if you don't know what it is, it's charging for separate parts, in this case, separate parts of a surgery that you don't get paid for. In this case, the surgeon did a foot surgery right on the top of his foot. And for some reason, my picture's not showing up, so I can't show you my foot. But if you look down at your own foot and you wiggle your toes and put your hand there, you can feel the tendons moving across the top of your foot. Well, in order to get to the broken bone, which is really in the middle of the foot on the top, you have to go in, move the tendons out of the way. And then there's a little nerve there that you also have to move out of the way in order to get to the spot where the fracture is. And that is just the way you get to this particular area in the foot. Well, this particular surgery center decided they would charge for fixing the fracture, moving the nerve, and moving the tendons. Well, they don't get paid for moving the nerve and moving the tendons. They only get paid to fix the fracture. And if someone is looking at a bill and knows nothing about surgery, they would probably say, well, that looks good. They did 3 things. We'll pay them for 3 things. They charged $45,000. WellRithms recommended a $12,000 payment. And this is something that I do on a regular basis. Charlie mentioned that they have pharmacists look at bills, and because the pharmacists know what's going on in the pharmacy industry. We have physicians look at bills because I understand surgery. I've done these surgeries, many that I look at. I've done them hundreds of times myself. So finding these places of fraud and abuse and abusive charging is what I do on a daily basis. These are another couple of examples. And honestly, I read about this stuff every single day of the week. I used to read about orthopedic procedures, and now I read about everything in the insurance world. And daily, there are physicians, nurses, other medical professionals that are involved in schemes to defraud Medicare and other insureds. And in this situation, when you are looking at a self-funded plan, this is your money. You want to have someone on the back end that really is interested in you and saving your money by just finding these types of problems in medical bills. So I'll turn it back to Matthew that if you have questions about these examples, and I have lots of stories, so I'd love to talk.
Thank you, Ira. Yes, he's a bit of a storyteller. We get on as WellRithms on a weekly call with all the employees, and we all love story time with Dr. Weintraub, where he tells us latest amazing things that he's seen as far as billing creativity. So thank you those are just some examples. If you want to go to the next slide, Bill, I'll just kind of take you through some responses to kind of medical billing concerns, and from a national basis, from regulatory perspective, obviously the inflation on healthcare is rising every single year, and this is just not sustainable. So we at WellRithms, we can curb those behaviors and trends by looking at these things and taking out all the waste. But the government is also trying a few things themselves. One is the hospital price transparency. If you are familiar with it, there's a nice quote at the beginning of this slide from the CMS administrator that says, "This puts patients in control and supports competition on the basis of cost and quality, which can rein in the high cost of care." Sounds nice, but we all kind of know in reality that patients do not control their healthcare decisions from a cost perspective. It's not their money, and they don't really go price shopping for healthcare. And if they were to, the other problem is that hospitals are not complying with hospital price transparency. Most of them are opting to pay a penalty fee of $300 per day to be in non-compliance rather than to post their prices. And that's obviously not a very high penalty, it's just an expense to them. So that's the kind of the problem with price transparency. Even if you were to be able to price shop, most of the time when you go into for a surgical procedure or something more complex, there's more to it than just, hey, what is this going to cost? So it's a bit of fluff from our perspective. The second piece of legislation is the No Surprises Act. This is new. As of last year, goes into effect, or starts going into effect in 2022. And this is really to protect patients against surprise medical bills in an out-of-network scenario if they go to an in-network facility. So we're talking anesthesiologists or assistant physicians and things like that. So it's really to protect from surprise high-dollar medical bills from out-of-network providers in an in-network scenario. This is great, actually. And there's another piece that focuses on ambulatory, air ambulance reimbursement, which is extraordinary what they're billing. So these are good pieces of legislation that are trying to address a need and a problem. But it is a kind of a moving target. The guidelines are not complete. We also know when you start regulating things, it doesn't necessarily always fix the problem. You still really need to make sure that from your perspective, you're looking at your medical claims. So that's what we do. How do we do it? We do it on a line-by-line basis. And that way, each and every claim is treated as a specific and unique scenario. We look at departmental costs that each hospital reports to CMS. CMS in turn determines a Medicare reimbursement rate for those costs, but each line should be consistent with what they report to CMS, what their costs are, and then what they charge. They also tell the CMS what their cost to charge ratios are. So that's how we audit our claims, A, making sure that everything on the claim is accurate, true, and consistent with the medical records, and then B, is consistent with what they are reporting to CMS as far as what their costs are and profit markups. We use the term quantum meruit, which is just English common law term, which means you are paid what is fair or what one has earned. So going back to the gauze pads example, is it fair to pay $21,000 for something that cost $7? I don't think anybody would agree that that's fair. And in fact, when we pay the provider a fair amount, they did not even question it. So sometimes these things, when the provider gets caught in their abusive schemes, we never hear from them because they, you caught me sort of thing. And it's a shame because it's happening on almost every single claim. And most people are not looking at these things. We've noticed that the fully insured BUCAs of the world, they are quick to increase rates every year. They are not quick to audit claims. And so when we move over into a self-funded environment, it's also not entirely common to audit claims. There's some automated software out there for just standard coding edits. But when it comes to really looking at claims and bill review, it is not common. The big guys aren't doing it. So, the TPAs generally do not have a system in place. So we like to educate plans and TPAs to make sure that they understand that this is their largest expense, on the claim side, and make sure it's nice and clean. So with all that said, at the end of the day, when you pay a provider for medical treatment, let's say it's an out-of-network scenario. One last comment is, if you are paying without a contracted rate, you've cleaned the claim, how much to pay it. Like I said, we use the departmental cost to determine what a fair reimbursement would be. If the provider doesn't like what we reimbursed, usually they're okay with it because it's fair. We're physician sensitive as far as reimbursement goes. But if they don't like it, they can balance bill the patient and cause lots of problems with collections threats and so forth with the patient. What we do is we take the patient out of it by assigning the debt over to a captive insurance company that's now fully responsible for that medical debt. So the plan and the patient are removed from the liability, and the fiduciary responsibility is transferred over to a captive insurance company. And that's a really just kind of one last protective safety net that we implement to make sure that on an out-of-network scenario, paying a provider fairly does not get mixed up into a dramatic event with the patient from a balanced billing perspective. So it's a nice way to do that. So that's just a quick crash course from WellRithms on medical bill review. And we just certainly appreciate the time allotted to us to go through that. And we're certainly open for more questions or conversations.
So Matthew, we had just one comment, which I already answered the question, but it was, are you on top of all self-funded plans or is it employer choice? So I answered the question that WellRithms is an employer request or an employer add-on, if you will. There's no fee for it as far as a flat fee or a fixed cost. If there are savings, then they'll take a portion of that savings and send you the net amount. So we call that a percentage of savings approach with regards to that type of fees. So to close this thing, we looked at choosing your TPA, evaluating stop loss, and then effectively manage all the claims. So I want to take a look at our case study, bring back our 550 person group, which was an actual case, and we'll end with this for you. But remember, this is 550 employees in 4 states in a manufacturing business in the Northwest. After applying all the principles we've discussed today, their actual experience is shown on this chart. So if you look at the orange line, you can see that line is the lowest line here. You will notice that these little, I guess it's turquoise numbers, they're up and then they're down, down, and then they're up and then down, up and down. So your claims are always going to fluctuate. One of the key aspects of looking at this compared to a fully insured, if you had this year in 2014 where your cost was high, historically, what has happened to you with a fully insured carrier the next year? They raise your rates because they say you had a bad year. So then they raise your rates. But even though your claims drop back down again, is anybody getting a reduction in their premium? The answer is no. But if we're self-funded, we do. This increase over this 7-year period of time in actual case situation is 2.2% or 2.1% was the actual increase year over year on that plan. And the average trend line, which is this red line going up in this manner, was 10% for all other employers in the same circumstance. In this particular case with 550 employees, that represents over 7 years, about $7 million in savings for this employer, or money not spent, let's put it that way. Money we did not have to spend because we reduced the baseline and then we managed the increases in the future to the lowest possible number. So we just didn't spend the money, and it was available then to add to our EBITDA and make the company more profitable on a go-forward basis. So I don't see any other questions. We appreciate it. We were able to sneak this in within our hour time. And so for Dr. Ira and Matthew, for Austin and Charlie. We really appreciate your time today. Amber?
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your valuable time and expertise with us today. That concludes our webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.